guys, Sonova here. Thank you for joining us on YouTube for another episode of Sonova's True Crime Files. Today we're talking with ex-mob associate Sidney Hurd, who was the main character in my Unorganized Crime, the biography of Sidney James Hurd. And so if you haven't read that book, you're going to definitely want to get a copy on Amazon, because some of the things you're going to hear today and in this series of YouTube videos, there is so much more in the book. Today we are talking about a specific topic called CIs, or confidential informants. Now, what some people don't realize is Sidney actually made a difficult choice in one point of his life and became a confidential informant, worked undercover with both the FBI and the DEA for the better part of a decade. And so welcome, Sidney. Let's get started and tell the viewers what made you become a CI in the first place.
Well, when I was indicted on the Cougaran deal, which that's in the book and everything, they would never give me a witness list until we just got ready to go to trial. When we got ready to go to trial, it was actually in the middle of trial when we stopped the trial, and I realized there was 70 some odd people that I'd done illegal acts with, and every one of them got immunity. They were all going to snitch on me. That really made me mad. I mean, in a way, you know, because we were businessmen, and they were none of them really what you call crooks or anything, but, you know, it just kind of made me mad. So I realized that, you know, I was hung out to dry. Well, at that time, I knew of smart enough laws, and I talked with my lawyer, that I could cop out to a 1 5-year count and they'd squash the rest of the indictment. That's the way the government usually does. Well, they didn't want to go for a 1 5-year count. They'd go for a 2 year to up to 10 years. Doesn't mean I'd get 10. So also, when I got through, Shirley LaBelle, who was the prosecutor at that time, we went back to the office. She said, well, they want to talk to you, and part of the deal was to give up the Cougarans, and they were all dressed and like they had shovels and jeans on, everything. They thought they were going to go dig them up, and I said, oh, did you want the Cougarans today? And they said, yeah, that's part of the agreement. I said, oh yeah, they're in the trunk of my car. And so they went out and got them. And then another funny thing is they wrote 4,980 Cougarans, and then within a half hour later, Shirley had sent them back in there because they wrote Cougaran. They didn't write counterfeit Cougarans on the receipt they gave me. So that was kind of, in a way, funny. So I got talking to Shirley, and I said, listen, you know, there's a lot of people that I've done a lot of stuff with, but everybody snitched on me. You know, I got a big thing. She said, well, what about what? I said, I don't want to work the IRS because I heard that he is, you know, talks too much to other people. So I already knew who Ron Jennings was. So he was the FBI. So they brought in Jerry Hubble, who was in the book of about Cullen Davis. They brought him up to work undercover with me. Well, then there was a crew out of El Paso that ran ethics, a guy named Bob. They had an organization that they would do anything, buy meth, take transportation. Well, they started paying me at that time, this not even counting the other money, they started paying me $2,000 a case. Well, heck, I sent them so much business down there in El Paso, they couldn't even keep up with it. They had cars and trucks coming out of their ears. They had people selling the meth. They couldn't even keep up with it because I'm out on bond. So everybody still knew me. And I set up a lot of major drug buys. The one was that one we'll get into someday where they hid me in Albuquerque, New Mexico, under an assumed name. They busted a big drug dealer. So I was busting other drug dealers besides the ones that I knew in that, but I started working with them. And by working with them, you know, I realized I kind of, in a one way, I wasn't going to play both ends in the middle. I'm either going to be a good worker at. And then when I even got to prison, I was still able to do stuff. I sent a letter, or I had a letter one time where this guy was going to try to kill President Reagan. That's in the book and all that. But when I was in prison and I'd go out on furloughs and so I'd gotten with an Italian named Vincent, we'll just say Vinny. And he was the FBI, and another one was Jim, we won't mention his last name, he was an Italian. Well, when I got out, we set up an operation. They had a regular little room that they would use, and we actually got a guy in there from Trinidad that was smuggling heroin into New York and then buying hot cars and sending them back to Trinidad. So Vinny went and did that one and busted it. That's the one that the guy put the $100,000 reward to have me killed, and back a long time ago. So, but I got paid for that little money, bonus money. But when I went to prison at Sigerville, they all came down because they all wanted to know who all I could tell on, who all I could do this with, who all I could do that with. And believe it or not, they brought $8,500 and they gave it to Suzanne, my wife at that time. And then later I got transferred from Sigerville to the county jail up there in Amarillo. So I was still able to work out of the county jail. And actually I set up sting operation. I had one time where a guy came in there that he supposedly, and I think we put this in the book, he swore up and down he did not have sex and rape this little girl. Well, and they had him in protected custody, and he begged and cried for me to help him. Well, I found out that he had a van, and his van he claimed was stolen. So I called around and found out where the van was, and the van they just got the van, and he sold it to some friends of mine. I said, don't touch that van. Don't go near that van. Go take that van. What did you give the guy? $500 for the van? Yeah, my wife will give you $500. Don't worry about it. Take that van out on the highway. Do not touch anything in that van. So sure enough, Suzanne parked it. The sheriff department got the big okay to go get it, and we got the money back. And then the FBI, because it was interstate, they checked the whole van out and found part of her hairs there. So he got a life sentence. So even though it was undercover work, I felt I'd done a real good deal there. I got that. So later, when I worked on a federal task force where we would buy heavy equipment, we would buy vehicles, we would buy all kinds of stuff. One of the funniest things, I got to tell this is hilarious. One time this guy calls me and says, hey, I got this semi for sale. I said, okay. And this is like 2 o'clock in the morning. So I called Betty and all that, and they get the cameras out and we buy the semi. The semi truck though had 40,000 pounds of frozen pies on it. We couldn't very well put it in a warehouse. We had to actually call the company. We kept the truck, but we had to get the trailer so that, the company could get it back. Where the guy never knew that, we did that because they wouldn't know that. Another funny thing was one time we're getting ready to go pick up a piece of heavy equipment, and about 3 blocks from where I lived on Garland, off of Garland Road in Garland on Lake Ray Hubbard, there was this gas station. So we got a flat tire on this thing. We're fixing to get a big front end loader on it. So we pull up to the gas station, me and Vinny does, and the guy said, well, I'll be a while before I can get to your tire. Vinny flaps up the FBI ID. And I go, oh yeah, okay, emergency, yeah, I'll take care of it right now. So he fixes the tire and all that. Well, what got me, the guy sees me. Well, after that, every time I go in there and get gas, you talk about the royal treatment. Anything we can do for you, anything you need, because he figured I was FBI too. I mean, it's funny how some of the perks, you get. But being a CI was not only fun, it not necessarily, I didn't like actually seeing guys go to prison again. But what got me is that I got to go to places that and go find out information that agents couldn't find out because they don't have what they call the pedigree. A guy pulls my prison record and sees who I was and what I was and all this in and out of here, bank robbery and all this that. I've got a made ticket to go anywhere with any organized crime. I never went after organized crime, but I went back to other people. But here's the part about a CI. Confidential informants are everywhere in the United States. You could not exist. The government couldn't exist without them. They use them all the time. But the bad part, there's good and bad about it. Here's the bad part. Some confidential informants are not honest about it. They'll exaggerate the trail to try to get more money. So, but they'll actually be after the same guy, except that the FBI is smart and intelligent. They know what's bull and what ain't bull. All right, so they're pretty good. All the other organizations, the big time government organizations, they know how to have a CI, and get the right money. You see the movie where the cops grab the guy, beat him up, all that, that's all bull. A CI is worth their weight in gold if they're telling the truth. Now, let me give you the low-level CI. What I call low-level CI is this. You got a town, we'll just say a town of 50, 60,000 people. Every police officer's got a prostitute or girl or a drug dealer, small-time drug dealer, that he knows. Okay, now, We'll just say Joe Blow is a regular crackhead that every weekend he may go spend $200 with the girls, what I call crack girls, right? Okay, so now all of a sudden Joe Blow comes in and he got $2,000-3,000, and there was a burglary in the next county where a lot of money was stolen or heavy equipment was stolen. So now the girl, she is smart. They're all smart. People think that just because they're crackheads, they're drug addicts, they're stupid. No, they know how to survive in the streets out there. They know how to survive getting a 30-day jail sentence for prostitution. They know how to do that. And where their weight in gold is that they remember this. So when they do get arrested, or else they're regular, as we used to call, you got to watch oh so-and-so, she's wired. That word wired meant was that as soon as you told her something about somebody broke the law, she would go tell the police right away. And she was what you call a paid confidential informant, because they need that, because they would have no idea that, oh, Joe over here, man, he spends usually $200. They spending $2,000. Where'd he get the money? Now they'll watch Joe. They'll put, they'll target Joe, because that's how a lot of times they're lead. Murders are different. Murders, they ring everybody's bell. And when you commit a murder out here nowadays, all confidential informants know that there's a big reward for the murder. If they know who did the murder, or if they can get a lead, they're going to make good money at it. I'm talking about also the drug addicts. You probably have more drug addicts and more prostitutes that are confidential informants. I'm talking about in small towns, or even like Chicago, something like that, because every precinct has their own confidential informant. I myself think that the whole United States couldn't exist without confidential informants, because even if they give the tip towards who did something, now it's up to the police to get the evidence together. It's not like they're going to give you the evidence. They don't know what they're doing, but at least they got them. So I'd say, while I was with them for over the period of years, not counting bonuses, but they actually had to, I was going to testify in a case one time, and the lawyer they were going to ask automatically, the defense lawyer, was, how much money did you get paid over the years as a confidential informant? Well, and the U.S. attorney added up, there was about $50,000. But that wasn't counting bonuses or other stuff like that. That was just the fee that they actually paid me every month, or that, and that was about, what they claimed that they paid me, at that one time, is roughly around $50,000. But there's a difference between when you're in a federal task force, you're actually part of the task force. You know that the stuff that you did and helped get together, like one time we stopped the whole load of Mercedes from being stolen. We arrested a guy on a different charge, and the truck was right there, and we get the truck back to Mercedes. Had $500,000 worth of vehicle. So we had a prevented loss of $500,000 that would have went to somebody. In other words, if you're out there as a confidential informant and the deal comes up, you have to buy it, because if you don't buy it, some other thief will buy it, and somebody will buy it, and then it'll just go through the chain.
Like, or worse yet, don't mean to interrupt you, but that reminds me of a story in our book about the time they didn't let you buy a very infamous stolen instrument. Can you tell them about that story real quick? How, and then it was finally recovered after you got the option to buy it and they turned you down. Then it was like 25 years after that, they finally got the instrument recovered.
A Stradivarius. This guy, I don't know how he got it, but he was a drug dealer. And he was telling me about things going down. And I used to always ask him, what's happening? He said, man, I got this violin. I said, what? He said, it's a Stradivarius. Well, I didn't know, but I knew there was one stolen in Dallas at the Symphony. So I looked, and sure enough, it's a Stradivarius. I said, what do you want for it? He said, $2,000-3,000. So I go to my connection. I said, listen, we can get that Stradivarius for $2,000-3,000. He said, man, ain't no way that's the real Stradivarius. What this low life getting? I said, who cares how he got it? It's the Stradivarius. I read it inside there. It says Stradivarius. And I don't know nothing about a violin, but I know for sure it's a violin. So he said, well, so when I went back to the guy, I originally was going to get the $2,000 of my own damn money and buy the damn thing. because to me, I knew it was worth a lot of money insurance-wise. And if the FBI didn't want to buy it, then I'd buy it. Whether they liked it or not, I was going to buy that thing because I got thinking of all the thousands of dollars. Well, they sold it to somebody else, and we never did get it. But in life, later found out that it ended up 25 years later, they recovered it. But it was the same old piece of, and it was inside there and all that.
Yeah.
We had one time where a lady that her son was in prison, and this is a granny caper. Her and her daughter, which was married to her son, they would go out and rent cars under phony names, that phony ID, and then they'd sell the hot cars to us, right? So we supply it, and we didn't want to put Granny away, but we had to keep a good front up. But then Granny comes up one time, she said, I got these a long time ago. What do I do? And she had $18,000 worth of savings bonds that were hot, and she wanted $1,000 for them. Well, back in the game, I'd have bought them in a heartbeat, but I had to buy them, and we had to buy that just as a front thing, even though it wasn't in our deal to buy stuff like that, but we had to use that because we had to keep our front up.
Right.
I got to tell you this one thing. In Irving, Texas, they had a task force that were actually targeting me and Vinny because Vinny was connected with the Chicago mob, they said, and I was a Chicago mobster, and they were actually after us so bad they would send people to try to get us in to come to Irving, Texas, me and Vinny. Of course, Vinny knew that, it was all set up, and we weren't about to reveal who Vinny was. He drove a Mercedes, and, we did all kinds of stuff and everything, but
He just
it was
played
really,
that role of a mob boss a little too well,
yeah,
huh?
He played it so good, they actually thought he was, in the mafia. But when this one guy got busted, he gave everybody up on me and Vinny. He didn't say anything about me and Vinny. And even though they all knew who me and Vinny were, the police and all that, and the FBI, he gave everybody all the names he sold everything to and this to, but he never would give me and Vinny up. We used to laugh about that because you're such a gangster, Vinny. That's why they won't give you up, right? Right.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, I got thinking about the CIs, because there's a lot of them that they've helped in major cases.
Mm-hmm.
We never know who they are. The government confidential informants are probably kept more of a secret than most people because they use them in big. Nowadays, with all the espionage going on, the home security, I'm sure they really infiltrate. I almost got to infiltrate one of the biggest things in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. And it was so goopy. I was in Missouri here, and they called me to ask me if I wanted to come back to Texas, to Dallas, that the Department of Public Safety had a sting operation they wanted me to set up. And they would pay me big bucks, 25 grand. I was all for it. I had that barbecue place closed up. So I went in there. What they wanted me to do is that they were going to get a whole semi-load of cigarettes without the tags on them.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted me to take them to convenience stores where Iranians, Pakistanians, Iraqians own, to see if I could get my foot in the door by selling them the cigarettes illegally, which they would have bought. Then once I get them all where I buy stuff, and then turn them slowly and within a year or two over to regular real agents in case they wanted to buy, terrorist stuff is what it really boiled down to. But the first thing was going to get them, not to bust them, but to get ourselves in with them. Right. Because there were a lot of convenience stores all over the Dallas, Fort Worth area where there were Pakistanians that were generals in armies, and I knew some of them. They hid out over here in the United States because they had death warrants on them and everything, Afghanistan too, but they still were active. And our government was worried at that time that they might be involved in terrorist groups, sponsoring them. Mm-hmm. So, but what happened was they, believe it or not, the Texas couldn't get the damn cigarettes. They couldn't get the ones without the stamps on them. Right. They could buy them, but we wanted ones without stamps because that made it a lot cheaper now.
Right.
And they couldn't get the thing set up. So that's when I ended up going to work for 2-3 different people, and then finally ended up, I was stuck out there, so I went to work for the DEA. Right. And that was bad news for me.
Bad news. Right. Now, so, and I know that we don't have any actual actual statistics in this, but just from your opinion, from what you've witnessed as part of the CI, and as as a criminal on the criminal side, how many major cases do you think rely on a CI to be solved? How many, just as a random percentage, how many do you think?
I would say a good 50% has to be, because here's why. It's not necessarily that the CI is going to give them the actual information to make the arrest, because they need the evidence. But the CI is going to tell them about somebody that's involved in the case.
Right.
And that's worth their weight in gold.
Right.
If you've also got a case and you don't know, say you got a big robbery, right? Well, like here, and we'll just take in the Springfield, you got like people stealing heavy equipment. Okay, all of a sudden you find out, all right, we caught these guys. They had a ring going. They got so many pieces, and they go on their farms and catch all that equipment. Somebody had to tell them about that.
Right.
There's no way they just lucked up on that.
Right.
And I'm not saying that, I'm sure a CI did, or somebody that, somebody that
either a CI or a tip from the public.
Yeah, the public. Yeah, the public.
Yeah. Now, I work on a lot of cold cases, and most of the cold cases, they're either solved by DNA evidence, because our science has finally improved enough to where we can solve it with this DNA, or it is solved by some kind of tip from the public. Those are usually the two main ways that they're solved. Yeah. And so I can see how a confidential informant won't solve the case, but sometimes you don't have enough evidence, you don't even know where to start. And so it's almost like a confidential informant will give you a place to start looking.
Yeah. Well, that's where the whole thing of a CI is worth its weight in gold in a way, because if you got no place to start, you got to start somewhere.
Right.
I watched a show last night. It's kind of stupid in a way. The guy killed his roommate. It was on national TV. It wasn't but what got me is they didn't have no evidence at all. They believed he killed his roommate. They believed that she disappeared, but they couldn't figure out nothing. But they used what you call pure police work, which I loved last night. They saw him going to the library all the time. They knew they had all his computer. What did he Google on the computer? How long does it take for a body to decompose? Well, that wasn't enough to arrest him. But then they saw him Google a spot out in the country and where these trees were. Why did he Google this spot? So they right away, they copied it. They sent an officer out there. This guy thought he was going on a wild goose chase. They sent him out there, and they're telling him, okay, go here. Here's where the trees is. Get out of here, go over. He had to climb it over a barbed wire fence there, go there. Sure enough, that's where her body was. But what I'm saying, it was old fashioned, good, which I love to watch on TV because, it was real police work. And they did. But you watch a lot of these shows and you realize, like nowadays with what you're doing, bringing up these cold cases, you need people to bring up more of these cold cases because it'll energize in their brain of something that maybe they overlooked. And I like when these new police officers take over cold cases because they can read the files. They can say, well, I wonder why he didn't fill up. Like you got your deal on Bonham, Texas, that you wrote about. Right. Well, they never even checked out this one guy's story. We don't know for sure it was true or not true. Right. But, nowadays, every lead helps,
Right.
And, but what I guess I'm partial in a one way to confidential informants because, and another thing is called, what we used to use back in the game is what we call dry snitching. And how you do this is how I tell the public that this is fun. What I do is I know Joe Blow on the corner selling drugs. Well, he's in competition with me, my connections are selling drugs. So what you do is you drop a dime on him, as they call it. You tell the police, listen, we got to get old Joe off the streets there. He's selling them drugs. Well, they don't realize you're selling drugs. Well, they'll set them up. And you actually set them up with somebody, and they'll bust them, arrest them. You got to make bond, all that, and put them out of drug visit. And I mean, that just goes to show you how, in one way, you've done a service, but another way, you're protecting your own interests.
Right.
Right. And they do that constantly in the drug visit. I
Right.
mean,
Well, it's kind of making a deal with the devil. I know there's a huge controversy over the fact that the government worked with Sammy the Bull to take down John Gotti.
yeah,
And I know to this day, there's people still fighting over it. And I'm like, I can see how they were really wanting to get down Gotti. And then they knew that Sammy the Bull, but I also kind of understand Sammy the Bull was betrayed. I mean, the person that he did everything for was trying to throw everything on him, and so I can see both of their mentalities. I don't agree with either one of them, honestly, but there's a lot of controversy around confidential informants, but I kind of see how it can be good in a lot of ways. It can be
right,
bad in a lot of ways. There
right,
needs to be a
right,
lot of judgment calls on who
right.
you work with and how, because it can turn out really bad.
I got to tell you this one thing. Years ago, when I was in prison, when Valachi tapes were, Joe
Hmm.
Valachi,
Right,
everybody had heard of him, they're
right,
$1 million, blah, blah, blah.
right,
Well, I happened to be, when I was in Atlanta, I looked out the bottom floor of that
right.
A block was mostly because they don't want them climbing stairs were mob people out of Chicago, New York. And Marion was mostly Chicago. One day I was walking the yard with a we won't mention his name, but he was big, big time and ran a whole family there. And I said, how did Valachi ever get away? He said, let me tell you something. And he told me, he didn't need a reason to lie to me. Valachi never told him nothing that they didn't already know. And I got thinking about that,
Right.
and sometimes, the old mobsters, you know, they have a certain code,
Hmm.
but I also know that they can do stuff that maybe that's the time that they were to do it or something.
Hmm.
So when he said that to me, it made me always think, you know what, that makes sense. He
Right.
never told them nothing they didn't already know.
Right.
They
Well,
never prosecuted it.
that's one thing
Huh?
I've noticed by watching Michael Francis, his videos and things. Um, he says and talks a lot, but he doesn't actually say a lot. If you get down to the details of what he's saying, he's very charismatic. He says a lot of things, but if you get down to the details, you're like, well, I just read that in the paper. It's not, he hasn't said anything that's going to get
Right.
himself whacked,
Yeah.
but he's very
Yeah.
charismatic. And so, he could make a whole talk show worth of things to say without saying anything.
Right. 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 And I learned that over the years and I learned over the years too that the old time, like we talk about, the old time gangsters thing is history.
It
I
is.
mean, we use the word gangster not in
Correct.
Texas. You're an outlaw if you're
Right.
illegal, but it's really history because nowadays to go out and shoot and kill someone is stupid because you're putting the heat on.
Right.
And once the heat is on, it now people don't realize you go out and just like the biggest no-no in the world: never kill a police officer, never kill a federal judge, never kill a prosecutor because it turns the whole world upside down. Everybody feels the pressure on it. All
Hmm.
law enforcement, they got to go out there and kick the cans and kick the doors in. What say? They go to their CIs. What's this? What that? Who did that?
Hmm.
And they learned years ago you don't do stuff like that. And when
Hmm.
people do stuff like that, it just causes more chaos.
Hmm.
It's not worth its weight no
Right.
more. I
Well,
think
and
the
like we
last
talked about last time, the mafia was really at the core. It was about making money and
right,
preserving the organization. It wasn't
right,
necessarily about killing somebody, whacking somebody, beating
no,
someone down. It was down to they condoned that if necessary, but down at the core, it was about preserving the organization and making money.
that's right. Definitely that way because you don't want to put heat on. When I lived in Amarillo, Texas, I'm not going to get involved in it, but certain law enforcement agencies know who I was, knew what I did. They had big charts drawn up with me here, another guy here, of our lawyers here, and all that. But they also knew certain law enforcement agencies knew if something happened in a certain areas and they needed help, who would they come to get the help from?
Mm-hmm.
Me.
Right.
Because they knew that I wasn't going to have nobody killed. And we always used to joke about, we'd have lunch sometimes, we'll just say law enforcement. So I'm not going to mention which one. And we'd be eating, and always remember, we don't need to find no bodies. It was just like a joke, but it meant the same thing. I always remember one time when a young black girl was raped, and they knew it was a black guy that done it, and so right away, that big publicity, rape a little girl and all this and that in the Amarillo paper and the TV and all that. Within 24 hours, of course, right away, can you help us? Because they knew I had a lot of rent houses in the Heights, what was called the black neighborhood. I also had some people work for me and ran a after-hour place in there. They knew it was mine, and so within 24 hours, the guy was all tied up naked in front of a deserted building with a big sign on, yes, I raped this girl. And how it was done, we don't need to talk about, but in other words, but everybody respected that because you stepped outside gambling, illegal, burning buildings, doing all that, you didn't hurt nobody. As long as you didn't hurt nobody, you kind of had, the sky was kind of the limit. When you start hurting people or causing people to get hurt, then, they don't care about banks and insurance. I know it's sad to say that, but nobody back in them days cared about banks and insurance companies. That was a way of life, making money.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today, and we will be making plenty more of these videos for you guys to watch, so stay tuned. Today's episode is brought to you by Bones Coffee Company. You can forget about boring coffee when you drink Bones Coffee. Not only do they offer a variety of flavors such as strawberry cheesecake and maple bacon, they are a family-owned company that puts great detail not only in their coffee, but in the artwork that comes on each individual bag. Bones Coffee has a coffee club that will deliver your favorite coffee to your door every month. If that wasn't enough, they also have some amazing swag to offer. Check out Bones Coffee Company today. I'll have my affiliate links in the show notes for you.